I have Kevin Durant at number 1. And Kevin Durant consistently breaks my brain watching him play basketball. Like how we just talked about how easy it is for Nikola Jokic. Like Nikola Jokic is more of an algorithm that's just like processing 97 different things at once. Kevin Durant just makes things look aesthetically so pleasing and so easy just through his sheer presence. Now, Kevin Durant this year is currently averaging 30 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He is shooting 56% from the field, 36% from three, 93% from the line. His pull-up numbers, which I am sure that you have in front because you busted them out earlier, are absolutely bonkers. His mid-range numbers are absolutely like brain-breaking in terms of how good they are. Kevin Durant currently this season from the mid-range areas from 10 to 16 feet, he is shooting 60.1%. From 16 to the three-point line, he's shooting 54.5%. I'll pull that up in terms of like what that means contextually compared to everyone else. I cannot imagine anyone else is even in the ballpark that he is in terms of how good he is as a mid-range shooter right now. Jason, why do you have Kevin Durant as your MVP so far at the midway point of the season?
So if I'm not mistaken, that means that he's shooting better everywhere from mid-range than Russell Westbrook is shooting at the rim. So I have another crazy stat for you on Kevin Durant because, one of the big things that really stood out to me is, you went over his scoring, which has obviously been otherworldly. We talked about his defense earlier, and I think he's a foundationally great defensive player for that Nets team. I think he and he absolutely deserves to make an all-defense team this year. And I hope that I think this is by far his best defensive season, at least since 2017, if not since his career started. That's the type of defense that we're seeing from him just by virtue of engaging and using his length to make plays. But a huge part of this particular season has been the sheer amount of times that other teams have been trapping him on ball screens. And it's funny because he has never been thought of as a great passer. I've always thought he's been a little underrated as a passer. I really came onto the Kevin Durant passing thing in the 2018 finals in game 4, where I was like, okay, he just played a LeBron game in LeBron's house. Like that was weird, like where he was just picking them apart from the top of the floor. But like he's kind of been thought of as like, he's a 5.5 assist for 3.5 turnover guy. Like he's not a high level playmaker, blah, blah, blah. But too frequently we don't realize that the goal of passing is not to pass to the guy who scores. It's for the team to score. And more often than not, it's about creating that initial advantage. And most teams are trapping that Brooklyn Nets high pick and roll and sending a body towards the short roller. And the short roller's ending up making most of the plays, which they've countered by putting TJ Warren there a lot, putting Kyrie Irving there a lot to make sure that guy who ends up catching the ball in that short roll is a guy that can make a play off the dribble, and they're getting a lot of good stuff out of it. But here's a wild stat for you. So among all ball handlers in the league who have run at least 100 pick and rolls, Kevin Durant is number 1 in points per possession. The Nets are scoring 1.26 points per Kevin Durant pick and roll. That's number 1. Derrick Rose, sneaky number 2 at 1.22, and Steph Curry at 3 at 1.21. But he's got a healthy lead as the best pick and roll ball handler in the league in terms of creating points there. And in a good percent, I think about 2/3 of those are him shooting, but another third of them are him just drawing that initial attention and creating that initial advantage that guys can capitalize on. I think that if I had him, I think he's the MVP if the season ends today. I'm not sure if it's sustainable from the standpoint of like, I do think the Nets have less talent than some of the other teams in this list. So I think that some other teams will end up with better records, which will probably hurt his case to win the MVP. But in terms of availability and the quality of basketball, KD and Steph were the 2 players that I saw this year that stood out from the rest. And Steph got hurt, and KD's just been out there every single night, and he's playing huge minutes. And I think I feel pretty passionately that if the season ended today, that he'd be the number 1 MVP guy right now.
Yeah, I would also throw Jokic into that 3-person mix as well. I agree with you on Steph and KD. So I also just want to bring up, and I fucking hate like the idea of like the narrative within this, right? But I actually think that like it's important here in a lot of ways. We are like, what, 2 months out from the entire like Kyrie Irving, anti-Semitism kerfuffle that like not only impacted them off the court, but actually impacted them on the court. Like Kyrie Irving was suspended for that. Steve Nash got fired because they were a total shit show at the start of the year. Then you have the Kyrie Irving thing happen where it threatens to like make them an even more like shit show league wide, even bigger shit show league wide. Like who do you think is like the guy that's like holding that team together? I feel like Kevin Durant doesn't get talked about in terms of leadership, like in terms of he's a front runner. He's a guy that nobody like wants to listen to. Like no. Who do you think the guy that's been like the steady presence on that team has been? Who do you think the guy is that like led them through that tough time? Yeah, you can say Jacques Vaughn. I'm sure Jacques Vaughn played a role, but coaches don't play as big of a role as Kevin freaking Durant, one of the 10 best players of all time, one of the all-time scorers in NBA history, certainly the best player on that team. This is an elite Kevin Durant leadership season on the court. He's leading in terms of his ability to keep them together offensively, keep them in flow, but he's also been tremendous this year defensively. He has been so critical to everything that they've been able to do defensively this year. His help defense is absolutely off the charts. He's in the top 10 in blocks per game right now. He's been absolutely tremendous. He's been everywhere as a help defender this season. I can't get over how strong Kevin Durant's leadership is. And I think that is something that he doesn't get nearly enough credit for. And I think he deserves a lot of it in the face of what happened with the Brooklyn Nets this year, with Kyrie Irving, with Steve Nash, with all of the number of things that occurred. Kevin Durant requesting a trade and then coming in and like being super professional about coming in and like being that dude again. Like, I guess that you could hold against him the fact that he requested the trade, but it didn't impact him, and it clearly didn't impact his impact on the team. So I do just want to give a shout out. Like, I think that it's hard to look past anyone else as having an impact in terms of the leadership department that Kevin Durant has had when the Brooklyn Nets currently are tied for second in the league. They have the second best record in the NBA.
1.5 back, I think, from Boston, if I remember correctly.
They're 1.5 back from Boston. That's right. Like that should not be happening. And it's happening because of Kevin Durant.
I'm so glad you brought up the leadership piece, because like Kevin Durant saved this team and saved this season when it was as broken as any that I've ever seen. To start the year, they were so bad defensively and so bad on the glass, fired the coach. The Kyrie thing was happening. They were floundering in the standings. It was bad. And, I think it's super fascinating because I think KD used one fundamental thing to galvanize the group, and it was his love for basketball. Yeah. Like, it was so, because if I'm not mistaken, when the Kyrie thing first went down, they went on a road trip, if I remember correctly. And I could be wrong about that, but they went and played some road games. And during that stretch, it was like just the guys and the hotels and the arenas. And their leader is such, like, say what you want about Kyrie, Kevin Durant is no nonsense. That dude, basketball is his one true love. There's not even a second place. It's like basketball, and then like 2 through 5 are vacant. And then there's 6, which, maybe his love for music or football or whatever it is. Like, that dude fundamentally loves basketball more than anything else in the world. And I think that passion and that energy kind of percolated through the roster. And there's a lot of guys on that team that are sneaky, like hoopers, like guys that love to play basketball. Like Cam Thomas is kind of a hooper, like Edmund Sumner is kind of a hooper. Kyrie Irving, his alter ego is that of a hooper, like his primary ego might be something else, but his alter ego is a hooper at his core, and like, I think that when that group just kind of, they played their way through it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And their leader led the way. And once they kind of established a little bit of belief, that train just kept going. And, they needed that signature win after, and they had that rough loss to Boston, but they've racked up some impressive wins over the last couple of weeks too. Like I'm so glad you brought up the leadership piece, because it's such an underrated part of this case. Like, it would have been so easy for him to mail it in and nobody would have said a damn thing. And they would have been like, yeah, the roster's bad. Like, I don't blame him. Like he's probably trying to get out of here. And instead, he's like, no, I'm just gonna play basketball and do the best that I can with this thing. And it turns out he's so damn good. Like those percentages on the jump shots don't make sense. They don't make sense.
No.
If you could lock Division I basketball players in a gym on a shooting machine and they wouldn't shoot 60% from the mid range. Most of them. Like it's outrageous. It's outrageous the type of stuff that he's doing this year.